today we are talking Hatchet. Yes, that's right, Hatchet, ladies and gentlemen. Now, you've probably seen this film on a number of streaming platforms in the last decade here or so. Hatchet is a slasher flick brought to us from the devious mind of Adam Green, who both wrote and directed this tale. Now, if you've never seen this film before, it's kind of interesting because, back before the Expendables existed, we didn't really use the term the Expendables of this. Like, you would say, like, the Expendables of action stars, which is what the Expendables were. You get Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Bruce Willis, Mel Gibson, Antonio Banderas, all these people from back in the 80s and the 90s who were just the biggest action stars out there. And then you start expanding, like the Expendables of romantic comedy or the Expendables of horror. And there's been a number of projects out there that have really, they might have not called themselves like the Expendables of horror, but they've definitely been alluded to that that's kind of the idea when you take all these horror legends and put them in a film together, basically. And most of the time, it doesn't turn out to be like the big budget efforts that we might get like for an action film or anything like that, because it happens actually quite a lot in horror. It's more common than not to see a lot of our favorite horror actors actually teaming up in a lot of films. A lot of them have worked together, but Adam Green kind of did something kind of groundbreaking, because this is only back in 2006, and he put together a film that starred Kane Hodder, who you might know from the Friday the 13th series most famously as the most famous Jason in the film. He took over in part 7, and then did 7, did 8, did Jason Goes to Hell, and then did Jason X. So Kane Hodder's been the most popular Jason for the longest time at this point. And so Adam Green gave him another starring vehicle because, and I have to assume, because I'm not going to pull the production notes or anything there, but a lot had been stalling on Friday the 13th between Jason X, Freddy vs. Jason, and then eventually the reboot. We were really at a point to where we weren't getting that much new in the Friday the 13th series, and especially in the idea that Kane Hodder was going to get to do more, because famously, he got to do Jason X, and then he was not brought back to do Freddy vs. Jason, which that's what everybody wanted. Everybody wanted Kane Hodder to be back in that role, but the director, Ronnie Yu, didn't find that that Kane Hodder kind of fit what they wanted to do going up Freddy vs. Jason, so they didn't use him. They used King Kissinger, who was also in Jason Takes Manhattan. But I digress. We got Hatchet, and Hatchet starred Kane Hodder as Victor Crowley, who was this creepy, mutated, massive, like, just monster of a man who was living down in the swamps of Louisiana, and unfortunately, who a few people on a haunted swamp tour, when they end up running afoul of Victor's lands, end up becoming his next victim. Now, Hatchet is such a fun tale because, to me at least, it seems very clear that Adam Green is trying to basically make a parody of slasher flicks. Like, if you go and watch your Friday the 13th, you watch your Halloween, your Nightmare on Elm Streets, all of that stuff, like, at least back in like the 80s or late 70s when all these films were coming out, some of them might attempt to take their source material seriously. But more often than not, like, the film was just like, it was very tongue-in-cheek. It was very a lot of these films were very humorful. Like, they're meta, of course, which led to the rise of big films like Scream and Wes Craven's New Nightmare in the 90s. But it's interesting because Adam Green, like, he puts together a very by the books, bare bones, decent. It's an entry-level story for the background of Victor Crowley, that Victor was cursed by his he was cursed by his father's former wife, basically, and she cursed them to never have healthy normal children or anything. And so Victor Crowley's father, Thomas Crowley, played by Kane Hodder, they ended up getting pregnant with Victor, and the birth of Victor killed his mother. And Thomas Crowley spent the rest of his years raising Victor, because, Victor was obviously not normal looking, had deformities and everything. And so Thomas didn't feel comfortable taking him around other children. So eventually we get to modern day, to where, unfortunately, Thomas ends up causing, not the death, so to speak, of Victor, but he ends up locking Victor inside of their home, which has been set afire by a bunch of kids who were pulling a bunch of pranks. Thomas never recovered, and he eventually died of a broken heart. And Victor, who basically has taken this curse upon himself, now targets and kills anybody that comes across his swamp as a measure of revenge for what happened to him and happened to his family. And unfortunately for our group of youngsters who run afoul of Victor Crowley and his haunted swamp, this includes Ben, played by Joel Moore, who you might know from Avatar, as well as from Bones. It also features Marcus, played by Dion Richmond, who I, of course, know from Not Another Teen Movie, or you might know from She's All That. And then you also have Mercedes McNabb from Buffy and Angel. And then you have Mary Beth Dunstan, played by Tamara Feldman. Now, these characters all go into the swamp with the idea of just this haunted swamp tour, and they find out they're going to get a lot more than what they bargained for when they come across the swamp of one Victor Crowley. And what's so interesting about this movie is the fact that I think that Adam Green plays it up even more, the idea that he's making a old school slasher in the modern day era. You know, we have cell phones, we have GPS, we have better communications, we have better weapons, better ways to defend ourselves against a lot of these killers who victims would go up against back again decades in the past. And we get to see a lot of that played up, how some of these things don't matter at all when it comes to a superhuman giant who's going to murder everything and everyone in his path. And Victor Crowley is just as brutal as they come, to a point to where, you know, you'll wonder, like, how could some of our other heavyweights actually stand up against Victor? Because some of our other villains have established rules to them about what could stop them, what hurts them, you know, what's your way of going about defeating these villains. And at least at first glance here, from what we learn in this first movie, Victor Crowley does not seem to have a lot of weaknesses. And I love the fact that eventually our protagonists, our heroes, figure out that, look, we can't actually stop this guy. We're going to try it. We're going to try this here. But if it doesn't work, our only recourse is to get the fuck out. And I like that idea being brought back, because I do feel there are too many movies, too many horror films to where we get like this new big villain who could very much be a franchise starter, and immediately it's a question of, all right, we can stop this guy. We can stop this guy. And it's like, well, maybe you can't, because maybe the fun is just running and getting the fuck away as opposed to trying to stop him. Because if you look at the group of kids that we're watching in the first Hatchet film, none of them really seem like they're in a good place to really oppose Victor Crowley. And not only that, but he kills Freddy Krueger at the beginning of the movie too. So, yeah, clearly this is not the guy that we really, really want to fuck with here at the least bit. I say that because Robert Englund is in the film. He plays one of our lead protagonists, Mary Beth Dunstan's. He plays Mary Beth Dunstan's father, Samson. We also get Tony Todd in the film as Reverend Zombie, who does not have a big role in this film, but as we will get to Hatchet 2, you'll see that Tony Todd does return back for at least one sequel in this 4-part series. Now, if you came here for blood, if you came here for gore, if you want some brutal deaths, this is the movie for you. And that's also so much of the fun of this film as well, too, is that Adam Green really leans into what made a lot of these old slasher flicks super fun, which is crazy, absurd, over-the-top deaths, just endless amounts of blood, spurts everywhere, which to the point it got fucking hilarious by the time the film was over, because like with each subsequent death there was just more and more blood just being tossed. I talked about this years back on a show called Now Playing Now that I did with my good buddy Mr. William R. Washington of Grapsity and Fightful fame, and I had mentioned this movie Daybreakers. It stars Willem Dafoe and Ethan Hawke, about vampires, and vampires are the norm, and they're herding humans like cattle and shit like that. And there's this part towards the end of the film to where the character of Ethan Hawke's brother gets cured of vampirism, and so then all these vampires near him start feeding on him, but then they get cured because they fed on him, and then more feed on them, and then they get cured because they fed on them. Like, it's this whole thing where if you get cured and somebody feeds on you, they get cured as well too, but then it just keeps going. And there's this hilarious scene in Daybreakers where towards the end that happens, and I told my wife and I told my friends, it's like somebody just had buckets of blood waiting, and someone's just like, more blood! And they just toss a bucket of blood against the wall. Just like, yeah, no, more, toss all the buckets. And I I feel like that's what happened here with Hatchet. Like, basically, like, Kane Hodder is ripping somebody's neck open, and Adam Green's just like, yeah, toss the bucket, blah, and it's like, it doesn't make any fucking sense in the world, but it's so good. And I love that we can get movies like this back, because it has a cast in it that at least gonna make you take it somewhat seriously. The production value is definitely better than, especially at 2006. It's better than most of the stuff we were getting at the time in 2006. So it's a very high profile release as well too. And the fact that even, yes, it is cheesy. It is absolutely cheesy, but I believe that's the point of the film, honestly. I think that's very much on purpose to just set it over the top, because I don't know if you could say it's particularly scary. And that's not a knock, because we've talked about it before, and I think we all understand horror doesn't actually have to keep you terrified the entire time. It's just the idea, let's get a good story to it. And I think that's one of the strong things here about Hatchet, is that the story is simple enough to where you can just sit back and enjoy what the characters are doing. But I think Adam Green also gives you such a, and I mean this respectfully, he gives you such a basic film that you don't have to think about a million things out of the ordinary at that point, and you can just enjoy a kind of mindless horror flick. And that's what's really, really good about Hatchet, is that it really is, respectfully, a very mindless horror flick that you can just sit back, get a bowl of popcorn, and enjoy what you're watching. And not only that, but you got 3 other sequels after that as well too. So if you really did enjoy this story, guess what? It's going to get expanded way more across these other films. And I don't know if Adam Green had Hatchet 2, 3, and Victor Crowley, which is Hatchet 4, all planned out originally. I really don't know if he did or not. But you could say, based on the way that the story picks up right after, at least Hatchet 2 for sure was planned. But who knows? Who knows for sure if this was his grand plan of putting together this amazing story about one Victor Crowley and the people that just come across him. I also think it's hilarious the fact that a lot of these actors end up in multiple entries of the film. I'm looking at you, Perry Shin, who's for sure, at least in the first 3 Hatchets. I gotta still watch Victor Crowley, but who's at least for sure in the first 3 Hatchets. We get some of the same people across all these films. And again, it's so interesting. It reminded me a lot of the movie Star Hunter, which is a deep get for sure. I bet none of you have seen Star Hunter, this mid to late 90s sci-fi horror film that's basically a Predator knockoff. But what kind of got me about it was the fact that a couple of our protagonists managed to get out of the area that the killer is like focusing on everybody else in. They managed to escape, and they go to a police station to try to get help. And it's kind of rare in a horror film where your characters can completely get out of the situation they're in, and they actually have a choice just to be done. Like, you're actually gone right now. You don't have to go back. Now, of course, because everybody's a good person in horror films, they go back to help their friends, try to stop the bad guy. And Hatchet across the series, I'm kind of going away from part 1, but it does that a lot, to where our main character, Mary Beth Dunstan, and kind of spoilers, but she does end up becoming our main character over the course of this series. We're led to believe in the first film that Joel Moore's Ben might be the lead character, because that's what we start our narrative on. But by the end of the film, and then of course over at least the second and third film, we see, no, it's not about Ben. It's absolutely about Mary Beth. And Mary Beth is taken out of the situation a number of times. She escapes from this whole situation a number of times and keeps getting brought back to it. And it's like one of those things where you can't help but just feel terrible for a character like that, because it's like, you escaped. It's like The Descent Part 2. You actually got out, and somehow you're being forced back into this bullshit again. I love it. It's a great narrative, and it's refreshing to see that a character can get away, and there are somewhat logical reasons for them to come back and risk their lives again here. That said, again, it's a fun, easy slasher flicking series to get into. If you're looking for some fun, bloody, gruesome, visceral kills, this is definitely what you want to see. If you want to see Kane Hodder basically beating Jason, but a much more brutal and mean Jason, this is what you want to see. And if you want to see basically the Expendables of horror across this entire series, this is absolutely what you need to see as well too. So check Hatchet out for sure, folks. Like I said, I was watching all of these recently, and it's interesting because I had seen 1 and 2, and I realized I had actually seen 3 as well too. And The only one I haven't seen as of yet right now is Victor Crowley. But we're going to get there. We're going to get there. I'm going to catch that. We're going to get the review up for it. Hatchet is free to watch right now. If you have Plex, if you have Vudu, if you have Tubi, if you have Hoopla, it's free on any of those streaming services for you to check out with ads. You definitely don't want to miss it though, y'all. It is a great watch. Check out Hatchet, and God, I'm losing it. Don't forget to come back and check out my other reviews featuring Hatchet 2, Hatchet 3, and Victor Crowley. Those are coming up soon for y'all too on T Watches a Scary Movie. Hey everybody, I appreciate you checking out this video, whether it was a review, whether it was a new episode, whether it was an unboxing, an interview, or whatever else. I want to remind you, you can check out my separate reviews also on my YouTube page, and new full episodes go up every Wednesday night on YouTube at 8:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and on your favorite podcasting platforms at 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like and share. My name is T. We've been talking scary movies. Stay scared.